am Anna Sewell, and this is Authentic Parenting, a podcast about growing ourselves while raising our children. I'm a psychologist, educator, and parent coach, and on this podcast, I explore how you can connect to your authentic self, practice radical self-care, and raise emotionally healthy children. Let's break the cycle of generational trauma for a more peaceful, kind, and compassionate world. Welcome to the final episode of the year. I am joined by my friend Christy Loricella, a licensed clinical social worker who is also an occasional co-host on the podcast and most known for the Death and Cupcakes episode. In this episode, we take a deep dive into reflecting on 2024. We discuss the highlights of the year, the challenges we faced, and the lessons we learned. We also talk about the books, movies, shows, and podcasts we loved. And of course, we share our goals for 2025. Since 2025 is a nice round number, we each picked 5 categories because 25 is divisible by 5 and set 5 goals for each category. As for word of the year, well, we're still on the hunt. But after recording, Christy helped me land on mine, level up, after I shared my vision for 2025, including my goals and intentions. I hope this episode will inspire you to take some time to pause and reflect on your own year, and that it offers some helpful insights as you plan for 2025. Thank you for being a listener, and here is to an amazing 2025. Cheers. Well, welcome to the podcast, Christy. I am so happy that you decided to do this end of year episode with me. It's always great to have you on the podcast, number one. Number two, it's always good to reflect on the previous year, what lessons we learned, what goals we are trying to set for the new year. I feel like end of the year forces us to pause and reflect for days on end. And hopefully this episode will be helpful for the listener as well. As we do our own reflection, we will help them reflect with the same questions on their own life and year and hopefully set goals. How are you doing this morning, this gloomy December morning?
I'm doing okay. I mean, a bulk of my work is done for the year, and so I kind of have a lighter schedule in the weeks ahead. And so I feel like I have the time and space to reflect and to look forward as well.
Yeah, it's always nice to have a journal, some questions, some prompts, instead of doing it on our mind. I think it's useful. I find usefulness to that. Even though every year I say that it's a nice practice to do it frequently throughout the year, to sit down and reflect and reevaluate our challenges, our goals. But somehow I end up doing once a year.
Mm-hmm. Well, better than not at all.
Yes. When you look back at 2024, was it a good year for you, a year of growth? Do you have, what was it? What's the significance for you?
For this year, I would say I took the leap mid-year to leave my part-time job to focus completely on my private practice. So that was a huge leap of faith. And, we also got our office in Princeton, which was very exciting. So I'm very, very happy with my professional accomplishments this year. So that was a huge highlight for me. Yeah. How about you?
Yeah, it's a similar vein again, but I want to comment that I remember a couple of years ago, we did record the same end of year podcast and you left your teaching job at that time. Remember, I think every time we record, you leave some kind of a job in that year. This is kind of a theme.
Yeah, I mean, I think over the years, I've tried a lot of different things and I've been kind of shedding like skins to get to like really who I am. And I'm so happy with where I am. And I've never had this experience before of completely loving my work and never wanting it to stop. Yeah, I think usually like there's an aspect of it that just doesn't click, but now I feel like I've found my calling.
Ikigai. As the Japanese say, you found your ikigai, right? The Venn diagram of you love what you do, you're good at it, you make money at it, and it serves people. So you found your ikigai.
That's right.
Yay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Highlights from the year. I was looking through my phone. Obviously, the highlights of the year is usually good to look through your journal if you have, diaries or agendas, that type of stuff, and the photo of your phone, the camera roll. And last year, as I tried to do every year, I try to take a picture from each event or thing that I did so that at the end of the year, it would be easy for me to, find the highlights. And I think I did my best this year. I think the biggest highlight this year was that I turned 50 and it was a great year. And now that the year is ending, and I'm like, wow, it went so fast. Right? You sort of like expect this number to be this big number, and there's this build up, anticipation. But at the end of the year, I'm realizing it was just another year. It's with our mind that we either create the hype around something or diminish, emotions around something. So, yeah, I turned 50. That was a big, big year. We, with you and another colleague, we opened our physical office, which is really exciting. That's also one of my highlights. I did 2 live events this year. I cannot believe there were two. And
Two amazing live events.
2 amazing live events, and you were present, you attended both. That was one of the biggest highlights. I did a lot of hiking, spending time in nature a lot. I was like looking through my phone, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what this year signifies. So many beautiful nature pictures I have. The book proposal, I finally submitted my book proposal, got rejections, got an agent, all of those things sort of came to some kind of ripeness. I did a lot of hanging out with people, birthday parties, concerts, shows, events. It was very rich, me organizing parties and birthdays and events and attending to a lot of social gatherings, small and big. So this was a very, very interaction rich year for me. And I did the colonoscopy as we recorded an episode.
Oh, I was gonna say your colonoscopy, but I didn't know if you'd actually list that as your highlight.
It is a highlight. It's a big accomplishment. And furthermore, every year I take time and I make a list of things for that year, goals and things that I want to accomplish, like 24 for 24, 18 for 18. So last year, obviously, it was a big list of 24 items. And the number one on that list is get a colonoscopy. So it was on my mind for years. I got it done, and you and I recorded that podcast. So, yes, those were my highlights.
Very nice. Very nice.
What were some challenges that you experienced?
Challenges. I had an injury in my ankle kind of at the end of last year leading into 2024. It wasn't a serious injury, but because it affected my ankle, it really limited my ability to walk. And it was really tough. And I think as a result, I kind of, the older you get, like the harder the recovery time is. And so it really was an experience where I had to slow down a lot. And as soon as I was able to and was cleared by my doctor, I was more appreciative of the ability to move my body. So that was a big challenge for a couple months. And I think the ever present challenge of being a mom and also having a career and being a wife and kind of trying to tend to all of those relationships. And I think that I'm still working on like putting myself at the bottom of that list in some ways. So that's going to be a real focus for my new year is really I've made progress for sure, but the challenge of really, really taking care of my body and getting a lot of movement I'm kind of heading from challenge to goal, but yeah, I think the challenges of I know self-care is something we say over and over again, alongside all the responsibilities on a home front and having your own business.
It's hard. Yeah. I think for me too, challenges are also in the health bucket. I think as we age, I'm 50, you're still in your 40s, as perimenopausal, menopausal women. Yesterday we had a support call and we talked about perimenopause and menopause and health issues. And, all of us are experiencing challenges related to our body and health. It's not the same. We're not 20, right? It's a tough time when you're in your 40s. You have, body image issues, health issues, weight issues. They creep in, those things. You go to your first mammogram, you go to your first colonoscopy. There are all those health things, and you have your aging, dying, ailing parents. And some of us, most of us, that age, people have teenagers. So I think life becomes very, very challenging on a different level. What I was observing this year was, yes, I mean, aging is great. You're wiser, smarter. You don't care about other people. You are who you are finally. You can say no and set boundaries. Like for me, there are some things I've become, that I love who I have become, but I've gained this layer of wisdom and new fears have crept in about health and dying, like a diagnosis may come up, or like what's ahead. I'm more fearful of those type of, more aware and fearful of health and aging related things. And I wish I was still young and naive. I don't need this wisdom, Yes, there's some goodness that comes with it, but there's also a lot of fears and, without knowing what's ahead. I don't want that knowledge. I feel like I cannot unlearn what I know about aging, dying, health, body, and you just have to make peace and live with that.
Well, I have a good one of my book recommendations you'll have to read.
Oh, I'm excited. I'm excited. So, yeah, my challenges were in the health category. I got some pretty, scary diagnosis, and I had pain and things of this nature that passed. But, you feel like, okay, this time it passed, but one day it's gonna stay, that fear is.
Absolutely. I mean, it can kind of take over your thoughts, and it definitely is something that I'm sure a lot of people can relate to, myself included.
Yeah. So for the listener, I think the takeaway from here is to sit down and reflect on the highlights of your year. And for me, there were many more highlights than challenges, but somehow the brain likes to focus on the challenges more. So I think doing this exercise is really good because you forget the highlights of your year. When this morning I sit down to do this exercise, I'm like, wow, there were so many beautiful highlights. I mentioned the biggest ones on this episode, but there were so many other highlights that I had forgotten. The year goes by and you forget what happened in February. So it's a really good exercise. Listener, take the time to go through your camera roll, read through your journals, and talk to your friends or people in your life to figure out the highlights, the challenges of the past year.
Yeah, and I don't keep a journal, but I do keep a paper planner. And those are good suggestions of going back in your camera roll and going, and I'm going to suggest going back in your paper planner if you keep one, because I often write like things that we've done on the calendar to remind myself, because I know a lot of folks do keep journals, but a lot of folks don't. And it is hard, like you said, to remember, like, what the heck did I do in February? Like I'm sitting here thinking, oh my gosh, I adopted kittens this year. I mean, that was a huge highlight. And I almost forgot about that.
See, that's exactly what I'm talking about. And the goal again for me this year is to take a picture from each event or thing that I am doing so that I can look back and remember, it's a wonderful thing. And another thing I started doing last year, but I didn't continue, was at the beginning of every month, because I have a paper journal, I started writing an intention for that month or setting a goal. And then at the end of the month, sort of reevaluate and take a look back and highlight the highlights, write down the highlights of that month. I did it for like about 4 months. And it was really powerful. When I was looking through my journal this morning, I'm like, wow, look at June. I've done so much in June. Who knew, right? In terms of, I went to so many concerts in June, or I've done, so it gives you this clear idea and you learn about your habits, your tendencies. When I look through my camera roll, I'm like, wow, I did so much hiking this year. Who knew, right? I know I spent a lot of time in nature, but truly, it seemed like it is the biggest thing in my camera roll. So, yeah, that's a wonderful exercise. Are there any lessons that you learned this year about yourself, about life, or maybe you relearned or there were reminders that stand out?
I think for me, the first thing that I wrote down when I was reflecting on this was to be patient. And I really feel like that, like, kind of that goes along with that is just like faith and trust that, what you're doing is good enough. And, what you dream of, as long as you're taking a little step each day toward it, you're on your way. And I think patience for me is still a really hard lesson for me to learn because I want it now. I want it now. And that mindset really, you miss out on the highlights when you are just focused on the end product, the bottom line. So being patient allows you to be present and enjoy all those moments leading up to whatever your goals are.
Wow, that's interesting. One of my lessons that I keep relearning is kind of aligned with what you're saying because when I did the events, right, and I did many events this year, like I organized birthday parties, surprise parties for people, things of this nature, I realized that I really enjoy the leading up part of things than the actual result of the event or the thing. And that's why I love the process. I love the building up, the prep, the organization in my mind, the ideas, the planning, buying the little things, thinking and dreaming, imagining. I love that part. When it all comes together, for me, it's like, because I lived it and relived it, imagined it so many times in my mind, I learned that, wow, it's the process of things, of living, of doing that is more important than the actual end result. And with my book proposal too, I hit the same thing. I worked on it for years and then boom, it's done. And it's like, I don't like that feeling of that completion. I love the process of things. And if you think about it, I mean, when you travel from one place to the other, of course, you want to go and be there and enjoy the thing, but it's the travel that is the present moment, right? So I think I'm learning that it's okay, I can give myself this okay to enjoy what I really like. I like the process of things.
That is in alignment with what I just said. I feel like it's kind of the flip side of it in a way. And maybe that's why we get along so well, because we somehow things fit together. I think also, as people who really want to do good and put good out there in the world, it's easy for me to get held up because it's not going to be, maybe what I'm going to do isn't going to be perfect. And I think it's really important to remember that just doing something is better than not doing something. Any small step that you can take is really better than nothing. And I think that women, especially, and moms, we really, really put a lot of pressure on ourselves to get it right. And it doesn't always have to be perfect.
Yeah, I sometimes do things imperfectly on purpose and I let it be just like that. I send an email with a mistake or a newsletter or a typo, or I don't go back and correct or apologize or anything like that. This is an exercise for me to practice being okay with small imperfections. And I have grown to be okay with a lot of things like that. In the past, I would give myself a hard time in regards to many things in all areas of life. Even with my work, with my clients, I can make a mistake. And the next time in the session, I will say, you know what? I think I said this. Maybe I should have not said it this way, or I should have asked this question. I forgot to ask this. I am a lot more admitting of my mistakes as okay part of normal things, as seeing them as personal failures and taking it personally and feeling embarrassed and shame and that kind of stuff. I have normalized that for myself by intentionally making even mistakes and being okay with them and growing in that space. But that's not one of my lessons this year. One of my lessons is how to do things differently and not be afraid to do things differently, from small things to bigger things. And we did a podcast episode about family traditions and holiday traditions, and doing things differently. Give yourself permission. It's okay just because you have done something this way for years, whether it's in regards to relationships, marriage, parenting, health. You can challenge your own things, even not only the societal traditions or your familial, even the things that you have set up. You can do it differently because it's the novelty, it's the newness that gives you that vital energy. This year, for example, a small thing, I changed the location of my Christmas tree. It's usually on this side of the house. I put it in a completely different spot. It's unusual, right? You need to adjust. But those are the things that I'm talking about. Even small things like that. I rearranged the things in my kitchen cabinet. Where are the mugs? The mugs are in a completely different cabinet. It's a small thing, but you get used to it. Maybe start small like that and do big changes in your life. Those small things make you, learn that it's okay to do things differently. And then you can do bigger things differently too. And I'm okay with that. Any other lessons that you have learned? Because I've learned one more lesson this year too.
No, I mean, I kind of covered all my things. What else have you learned? I'm sure there's way more, but just for interest of time, I don't really have anything specific I want to add, so I want to hear yours.
Well, this year I learned, because this was very momentous, those lessons. I'm sure I learned a ton of other lessons that I haven't paid attention to or I haven't wrote them down, but those I wrote down. So I know for sure. Leading up to my live event in October, it was a very potent, rich, emotionally rich period in my life in many ways. The health diagnosis, someone passing, my neighbor, my friend, my cousin had a child at that moment, so many things. I got my first rejection, and there were so many conflicting, mixed emotions, opposite emotions I was feeling all at the same time. Like, I got a rejection for my proposal, and my friend notified me that she got her PhD. Everything was in the same vein. A child was born in my family and my neighbor died. Like, how do you hold those opposing emotions that are both big and potent at the same time? I was doing the live event, and, the war was like happening in the world, like things were happening on a global level that is like, wow, like, I'm excited about my event, but this is what's happening in the world. So it was very hard for me to reconcile and to be present with all of those emotions. And then this expression came to me as I was crying and getting ready for my event. And I'm like, I don't want to do this event today because I don't know if I have the capacity. This expression came to me: your heart was made for this. And it just clicked that yes, it can contain the big loss and the sorrow and the sadness and the big joy and the big anticipation of things, right? The excitement for this newborn child and the grief for this woman that was a dear friend. But boy, it was so hard to allow for my heart to be open. I was being very conscious and present and letting all the emotions come and go, and crying and laughing and writing down and dancing. I was doing so much, and then it passed. And I learned that your heart is meant for this, whatever that you're going through. Allow, be present, feel. It's okay. Don't close your heart, because your heart is going to just get bigger and bigger. The bigger the sorrow, the bigger the joy you're going to feel later when you feel joy, or even at the same time, like I was feeling.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I love that.
So let's talk about some of our favorite books, podcasts, shows, discoveries that we have done from this year. Should we start with books since we all love reading
Sure.
books?
Yeah, how do you want to do that?
Have you read any, do you have any good recommendations? How many they are, it doesn't matter.
Well, I wrote down 5 books. I have I challenged myself this year to read more fiction. I had kind of strayed from fiction for a few years, going into grad school and whatnot. And having been an English teacher formerly, I love fiction. So, one of the fiction books that got me back in the saddle was a book that a friend recommended called The Cliffs by J. Courtney Sullivan. And I think readers would really love this book because it not only explores a woman's life during a really difficult time, but also kind of it takes place in rural Maine and also puts her life in context of her family, her relationship to her mother and her sister, and then also their place in the region where Native Americans originally were and how their lives all intermingle in that region. I really loved it, and I think your readers would love it too. And also, the main character is not a mother yet, but she yearns to be a mother, and that's another aspect of it that I think the readers would enjoy.
Yeah, I haven't read that, but I'm intrigued now. I'm going to put it on my list.
Yeah. And then the other biggie and she's received a lot of attention for it, but the book All Fours by Miranda July, which I think is just a real masterpiece and absolutely captures the very, very difficult place of being a mom and being a woman in perimenopause and, wanting to be taken seriously, but also wanting to be sexy and intimate and how, I don't know, just how when our body changes and we age as women, we just are seen differently by the people around us. And it really explores that topic very well. So that was another, I just couldn't get enough of it. I just couldn't get enough of it. I highly recommend it.
That sounds good. I'm going to put that on my list as well. Any other books? You said you had 5.
Yeah, so I discovered a book by Natalie Goldberg, who is your readers may find her familiar. She wrote Writing Down the Bones, which is a book on creative writing to get folks writing. But she wrote a book called Writing on Empty, and she wrote it kind of in response to her time during the pandemic. She's in her early 80s, I think now. But the book, and I listened to the audiobook, which she narrates herself, and it's kind of about the time of in retrospect, exploring what it felt like to be in the pandemic and to be shut down and closed off, and how she kind of wrote herself out of that time period. It's a really beautiful book, and she also has writing prompts in it to inspire you to write on your own. And then the book, kind of what I referred to earlier by Pema Chodron, How We Live is How We Die. I love that book. And I think that it's in terms of having anxiety around death and fear of health prognoses and things like that, I found the book to be very insightful and comforting. It definitely teaches you a lot about the Buddhist perspective on death and dying. And I don't know, the word comforting just comes to my mind, and informative. And then finally, an oldie, but a goodie. I find myself constantly returning to the book Radical Acceptance by Tara Brach. I have it on audio, and when I have a long drive, I just open it up again and listen to it. And there's always like something new that I get from a chapter that I've probably read like 5 or 6 times already. So those are my suggestions for readers.
These are great books. Yeah, I love that. I'm gonna put them on my list for sure. Like you, this year I also read more fiction than nonfiction and less parenting books, which is kind of maybe bad because I don't have good parenting book recommendations for the listeners if they were looking forward to. I haven't read much, and whatever I read, it's okay. I'm not so crazy about those books. I started listening to audiobooks this year and I loved it. I discovered that listening to fiction is a lot enjoyable than nonfiction for me. And I have several book recommendations since I'm also in a book club. We read some fantastic books in our book club. The one that I enjoyed immensely, which was not liked by majority of my book club members, was Tom Lake by Anne Patchett. It's about the mother who is telling her life story during the pandemic to her three daughters. They own a cherry orchard as they gather the cherries from the trees. It's kind of like an idyllic, boring setting, but this woman tells about her life story. Her children are learning about their mom, who she is, right? And who she was. She had this acting career that didn't turn into anything. She just became a mom and a farmer and things like that. So it was kind of nostalgic, warm. A woman of a certain age, like perimenopausal woman, would enjoy that kind of book, but younger women in the book club did not enjoy it. So I really enjoyed that audiobook, especially because it was narrated by actress Meryl Streep. And she did a phenomenal job. So she made the audiobook stand out. Yeah, I also enjoyed another fun book that made a big splash, Remarkably Bright Creatures, about the talking, like thinking octopus. And the narration is phenomenal. So I would say the book is good, but the audio book, because you can hear the octopus's voice, how he makes comments about people. And it's a different book, but it's really light and enjoyable and fun. And there's some twists and family relationships. And it's about loss and grief and things like that. It covers topics, but it's a fantastic book.
Thank you for reminding me about that because I think you had mentioned it a while back and I really wanted to read it and I totally forgot about it.
Another good book was The Women, about the Vietnam War nurses. That's a fantastic book by Christine Hanna. It was a 2024 book. And I highly recommend how women were in Vietnam, but even their families, they denied their reality that there were no nurses in Vietnam. What are you talking about? You were not in Vietnam. That the PTSD of how those women in the front lines helped men. And it's a very moving, potent, poignant book. And of course, it has a nice, good, happy ending. And yeah, I strongly recommend that book. But my absolute favorite from this year is My Brilliant Friend by
Mhm.
Elena Ferrante. Uh, which I also read the second book in the same series. It's Napolitalian. How do you say it? 4 books in a series happen in Naples. And wow, this book has just turned my whole psyche upside down. It's a powerful demonstration of friendship, but it's more than that, how we influence one another as friends, the coming of age story of this woman, the post-war era in Italy, the poverty, the role of education, the role of good mentors and teachers in your life, how it can make a difference. And you can end up on a completely different path and have a different life. But also the violence in the movie, how people who love you, they can hit you and they beat you. And it just, and the contrast that between the intelligent people in the city and just what the heroine is going through, it was so rich for me and it reminded me of me, my life. I have so many parallels with that book and I cannot get enough of it. It's a fantastic book. Highly recommend.
I told you that I started it and now I really, really have to finish it.
And it also has the show on HBO Max. I started watching the show now and it's equally great, but you have to read the book first to see the show because there are parts in the book I was looking for. That there was one part in book number 1 that touched me so much I was crying. Just the description, the mental, and this author has this powerful way of describing the emotions and the mental inner dialogue, but it didn't translate on the screen that way. And in the second book, there was something that was written, and I just like, It was good, but in the movie, it was enhanced with music and with acting. So, both show is great too. It's fantastic. I cannot describe it enough. And the way the author describes things and the show that's how I saw it in my mind's eye, the neighborhood, the colors. So this author is a fantastic writer.
Yeah, and those books have been around for a while,
Yes, they
right?
have
I
been.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, but it just seems like it's over the years, it's just people keep discovering and just it really, really speaks to them. So can't wait.
Were there any shows, not TV shows, like shows, Netflix, whatever, streaming, what you watched that you would recommend?
Yes. I watched a lot of TV this year, way more TV than I ever have in the past. And I think it's because I was like allowing myself to like have downtime and to rest. And I love watching movies. I love watching shows. I am going to share, I have a few recommendations. My top recommendation is Somebody Somewhere. It's kind of a comedy drama on HBO Max. It's beautiful. It's about people in their 40s in rural Kansas. And I mean, that probably does not sound very appealing to the broad audience, but it's so relatable as a woman in my 40s. And it's funny and heartfelt and very inclusive. And I can't really say any more specifically about it because it's just generally a beautiful show. And there's 3 seasons of it. So, and then the second one that I want to share is a documentary with Will Ferrell called Will and Harper. And Will Ferrell has a dear friend who he was a writer on Saturday Night Live with, and that person transitioned to being a woman. And so Will has this idea of let's reconnect for a drive across the country so that you can experience the country. Harper always drove cross country, but now as a trans woman, Harper wanted to experience it with a little safety. So Will Ferrell goes with her and they travel the country and they explore their relationship, their friendship, what it means for Harper to be a woman and to be in public. And it's so another really heartfelt, beautiful, honest account of friendship, and also pretty beautiful look at how a lot of Americans really embraced Harper along the way. So it's very nice. I know we've talked about Baby Reindeer.
We personally talked, but let's talk on here too, because that's on my list too.
It's on your list too.
It's on my list. I love that show.
It's dark and compelling, and probably listeners have probably heard about it. I find that the title to be very deceiving. I think if I hadn't heard about the show, I never would have picked it. And I'm so glad that I watched it. I mean, if you're into like psychological thrillers, and I don't know, what could you even say about it? I don't even know what to say about it. I mean, it's just such a mind-blowing story.
And from a male's perspective, because we always see the woman as the protagonist, as being sexually abused or being chased and stalked and things like that. I loved how the main character, it was from a male perspective. I liked that, and the vulnerability that he demonstrated and showed, the twisted relationship that they had and how it evolved, how it just was so powerful. Some people could not watch it. I recommend it to people, but I'm addicted to these kinds of things. I like the dark stuff. I'm not into light romantic or sci-fi things, right? This is the genre that I enjoy. And so I really, really enjoyed this show. Highly recommend it.
Well, and I think this might encourage more people to watch it, that the actor is also the writer and director of the show, and he also lived it in real life. So it is so interesting to see a man acting in a show about his life that he actually lived. I mean, it's like those Russian dolls, like one one
Matryoshkas,
amazing
yes.
aspect after another. So really well done.
Really well done. Yeah, I highly agree with that. And any other shows?
Nobody Wants This
I have that on my list too.
You do?
I do. Yeah.
I think it's beautiful. Again, another sensitive man, another intuitive, sensitive man, and really unexpected. The female main character, has this revealing sex podcast and winds up falling in love with someone really unexpected. And it's so well done and such a beautiful portrayal of like being really vulnerable with a new partner and learning to trust each other. And yeah, really beautiful.
Yeah, it was light and I enjoyed it. It's a rom-com, but it was well done. I enjoyed it. The chemistry between Adam Brody and Kristen Bell was phenomenal. I think it made the show, and the outfits and the podcast, of course, the podcast. I love that podcasts are now in shows, you know? It's a thing. It's part of our mainstream conversation. It's no longer, hey, I discovered this podcast. You should listen. What's a podcast? Nobody asks that question anymore. And I'm very happy about that, because podcasts are a big thing now. But when I started, and most people started 10 years ago, it was nothing. Like, I was in the front lines of this
You're a
podcast.
pioneer.
I am a pioneer. Now they are a thing, and it took 10 years for it to become mainstream. It's like, wow, it's so interesting. Everybody has a podcast now, and I hate that, right? Every actor, every comedian, everybody has a podcast, and it's so saturated. I received the Christmas card from one of my old listeners, and she said, I'm not current with your podcast anymore because I listen to audiobooks. And I was like, I was saddened. And yesterday, another one of my listeners during the support call, she also said, oh, Anna, I'm so sorry. I was your number one listener. I listened to all the episodes like nonstop for 6 years, but then I stopped. And I understand because I don't listen to podcasts, to the same podcast all the time. But I feel sad when I hear things like that. But there are many podcasts, many shows that compete for people's attention.
I had two more.
Yeah.
One is another show that includes a podcast is Only Murders in the Building, which I don't know, with Steve Martin, Martin Short, and Selena Gomez. And it starts off that they're true crime podcast listeners, but then they turn into true crime podcast creators. And it all takes place in New York City. And it's a great show and really smart and really funny. And also, Central is a podcast.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I would like that. Yeah.
And then the last one was obsessed with Martha Stewart and her documentary about her, Martha. It was amazing.
It
I
was
mean,
amazing. Yeah, I saw that too.
in terms of like really embracing the light and dark sides of ourselves. And like she's just honest and direct, and she just puts it out there. And I was really, really amazed to learn so much about her life.
I was amazed to learn about her. I was receiving Martha Stewart magazine, the Living magazine. I was, a Martha Stewart fan, I guess you can say, long, long time ago. But I was disappointed in her personality. I discovered things that I didn't want to know about her throughout the documentary. She has dark secrets, or the life she led, or how she abused people and things like that. It turned me off. And now I see her a lot, and she looks a lot younger for her age. And I'm like, oh, I can't stand this Botox and surgery to look more youthful than your actual age. I just cannot. She's not my hero anymore. That's all I can say. The documentary was well done, but come on, like, you're in your 80s. You shouldn't look 40.
It's really funny because like
I cannot stand that.
That documentary made me love her so much more.
No,
So it had the opposite reaction for you.
opposite reaction. Yeah. It's like fake inauthenticity, covering up, portraying things that they aren't. That's what stood out to me. And her hiding certain things and sort of disclosing and being vulnerable, but not really. Just no, it didn't work for me. But I watched it and I enjoyed watching it. But she, as an icon, a person that I loved her magazine, no, I disliked it.
I didn't think she had plastic surgery though.
Whatever she has. Of course, she has to had something. How can you look in your 80s like a 40-year-old with no
She was a
ring?
model. I mean, she has got a lot of money.
I'm sure she was a model, but she doesn't look older. And I cannot stand that in people. If you're 80 and you at least need to look a little your age, maybe you can get some work done.
She was the oldest person on the cover of Sports Illustrated.
Yes, like a little too far, too much to my taste. Okay. Yes. Was she an original? Was she an original influencer and things like that? Yes. And I admire that about her. How she was in the stock market in a male dominated world. She made, she became someone first female billionaire, right? She made a big, I am amazed by that story and inspired. But when you learn about someone's personal details, sometimes I don't know. Yeah. Anyways,
It sounds like we can do a whole podcast episode about Martha Stewart.
we can watch it again and talk about it,
All right, what are your favorite shows?
Well, so you already mentioned the baby reindeer. Nobody wants this. I'm going to mention just two, and I mentioned the brilliant friend already. So I'm going to mention two, the Nine Perfect Strangers and Maid. Maid is an old show that it was on my list to watch. I don't watch a lot of shows and TVs. So
Maid, MAID, right?
yes.
Yeah.
It's about a woman, domestic violence, her struggles as a single mom, how she just gets made jobs and then she goes to university and all of that. It's based on a real story and it's pretty moving. I was crying so much. She ends up in a domestic violence shelter and things like that. And it's an older show and an older book, but I finally caught up with it. And I was very impressed and I really enjoyed it and I liked it. It's about motherhood, protecting your child and doing things for your kid. Now that you have a kid, you go through so many hard things and sacrifices and abuse that she endured, and the role of childhood trauma shows up, how you choose an abusive partner and stay with them. It's really rich. I really liked it. And then I'm recommending Nine Perfect Strangers, which is a show about this retreat. I think I mentioned it to you. Somebody gave me the book as a Christmas gift last year. I started reading it, but then once I discovered there is the show, I'm like, I'm not reading this big book. I'm watching the show. And it was fantastic. Nicole Kidman is the Russian, she's acting as the Russian host of this retreat, and there is psychedelics involved, and 9 random people, perfect strangers, go on this retreat. What ends up happening? Again,
It's a
like
series or a movie?
no, it's a series and it's like Baby Reindeer. It's dark, psychological. It touches on the subjects of loss and trauma, and it's really powerful. And the show is nice, and the characters, their relationships. I highly recommend it if you like these kinds of stuff. Obviously,
I'll definitely be binging that this week.
yeah.
Weekend.
Yeah, those were my recommendations. And podcasts. Have you listened or discovered new podcasts?
I have to say, I don't listen to a lot of podcasts other than yours. And I enjoy Esther Perel's podcast where she actually does therapy on on the recording. And then I'm obsessed with Tara Brach, who Radical Acceptance.
Yes, I have it here on my podcast.
She releases not only weekly meditations, but also weekly talks. And they're usually about an hour long. And I listen to them on my walks. And they're just so, especially around the election, I found her talks to be so comforting and so centering,
Grounding. Yeah, I agree. Highly recommend. She's one of my favorite podcasts of all time. And it's called just Tara Brach. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's about it for me.
Yeah, that's okay. I also don't listen to many podcasts as before, I have to admit. And partly because there are too many to choose from, it overwhelms me. It's hard to find a podcast. It seems like it's easier because there are categories and searchable and whatever, but I don't know. What I listen to this Jungian Life every episode. I'm a religious listener of this podcast and highly recommend if you like psychoanalysis and things like that. But Jungian, there are three good friends and Jungian analysts, and they discuss deep dives, insightful topics into different themes, topics. I just love that show. I never miss an episode for years. And then I have Fail Better with David Duchovny, a celebrity podcast. But I started listening to it, but then I kind of stopped. He sort of normalizes failure and talks about failure from a different angle with different actors and well-known people. I'm a David Duchovny fan. I think he's very handsome and sexy. But the podcast is not disappointing. I recommended it to other people. Then another podcast that I discovered and love is Working It Out with Mike Birbiglia, who is a comedian. He is one of my favorite comedians. And one of my highlights, I forgot to mention, I went to see him in the show in real life in Red Bank, New Jersey. It was one of the highlights of my year. It was fantastic.
He's a genius.
He is so great. He is a great storyteller. You know, the way he shows vulnerability and how he talks about serious things. It's not a comedy show. It's a comedy show plus like a TED Talk, something else, you know. I love him. I love all of his shows, and his podcast is amazing. And yeah, he's just like a humble, good person also, as you can tell from his show. I'm a big stand-up comedy fan, obviously. I listen to a lot of comedy, you know, and yeah.
Oh, I saw a highlight in terms of stand-up comedy. I went to see Nate Bargatze.
Oh, I like him too.
Yes, yeah, he was great. I saw him in New Jersey with a friend, and I think that special that they were recording is coming out right now on Netflix. So I highly recommend him.
Yeah. I've seen all of their episodes and things like that. Any things that you purchased or bought or, you know, gadgets, gizmos, or some little things that you think are notable to mention here?
I have to say, I kind of got hooked on the TikTok shop. I didn't buy a lot of things.
What's a
but
TikTok shop? Sorry, I don't know.
So as I'm scrolling on TikTok and watching videos, if there's like a product that somebody's promoting that I'm interested in, you can just put it in your cart. And then it worked out really great for me this year. And as we speak, I think the Supreme Court is going to potentially be deciding on whether TikTok is allowed to exist in the United States anymore. But
it shouldn't ban it. Yes, it shouldn't. Yes.
But what I thought was amazing was I wound up putting all these things into my cart over the past few months that I wanted to buy for my son. And then when I was ready to Christmas shop, I was able to go through the list and delete the things I didn't want and order the things that I did. And I have to say, I was a total sucker. I bought him this awesome digital microscope. I bought him like this fitness, like boxing thing that you punch on the wall. It's like digital, like a game. And I don't know, if you're not on TikTok, you might not know, but I totally bought a vibration plate, which was
I know what that is. My friend has
advertised
it.
far and wide. And I have to say, I've had it for about 2 weeks and I've been using it and I love it. I use it while I'm watching TV, and I was a total TikTok consumer this year.
Oh my goodness. Wow. I've never been on TikTok. I don't know what it is, and I don't even want to know. Let it be banned. More consumerism. Let's promote more things to people. No. I haven't bought anything that I would recommend per se, so I don't have any recommendations in that category. I think maybe we can talk about some of our goals and wrap up this episode. Have you thought about your goals for the new year? What hopes and dreams and goals do you have?
One of my goals is I want to go roller skating.
Wow, nice. I'm scared to break a bone and fall and whatever. I would love to, but because I have this wisdom about age and bone density, I don't want to try.
Well, I figured I used to roller skate when I was younger, and I figured I haven't gone in a long time. I do have a fear of getting hurt, but I think I would go with some protective gear for myself so that I could, my knees especially and my elbows. And I think I just need to do it once. I just need to do it once. I just want to feel the sensation again. But
Oh, yeah, you should.
That's just one of my very fun goals for the year.
Yeah. Well, speaking of goals, you know what I decided to do this year? I think I shared with you since I make this list like 24 for 24, 17 for 17, 25 for 25 is such a round number. So I decided to break into 5 categories for my life and come up with 5 goals in each category.
I did your homework assignment.
You did it? Oh, yes. That's perfect. That's perfect. So, what other goals do you have?
So I have 5 categories of 5, and my categories are finances, fun, family, fitness, and I couldn't think of another F to cover creativity. So I have 4 Fs and a C.
And all you're missing is the U and the K, and it's a word. No, I'm sorry. Oh my goodness. I'm noticing a theme, the F's.
So fun is
Fantasy. You can put creativity, fantasy.
Oh, yes, thank you. Oh my gosh. Yes. That is perfect. Thank you.
Because
my
it's
gosh.
it's creativity, imagination.
Yes, that's perfect. It covers all of my goals in that category.
Oh,
So,
wow. Your
yeah.
categories are let me announce my categories because they're very different. Podcast, health, fun, personal, work. Those are my 5 categories. And I started writing down general list of things. And so far, I think I have 23. I haven't made it to 25 yet. And I'm going to group them and put them neatly in all of the 5 buckets.
Oh, interesting. So I brainstormed the topics, and then under each one, I broke it down into 5.
Yeah. For me, I just started the list of things and now I'm going to push them in the buckets. And some buckets may have more things than others, you know?
Okay. I was trying to do 5 for each.
That's what I was trying to do. But then I realized some of the categories have more, or there are things that fall into no category.
Since
So,
we both have fun,
mhm.
what do you have under fun?
What do I have under fun? Travel. I have art, comedy. That's what I have. I don't know what that means, but I can look in my list and see. Under fun, I have learned Italian since I read the book and I watched the show. And now, una cosa bella, I'm going to learn Italian. It's going to be fantastic. And I can record my podcast intro in Italian. No, I'm kidding. That's one of the funs. Put out the table tennis that we have. That's under the fun. We have it, and during COVID, we purchased it and we used to play with neighbors and everyone, but organized it and put it away. So I'm going to take it out. I think that's all I have for now. And art and things like that. I'm going to do this monthly art project with friends, getting together and making art. I put that under fun, stuff like that. But there's a lot of things under the podcast category. Health, obviously, is just like workout, more than I usually do. Meditate, eat well, check my protein intake and things like that. Cardio, stuff like regular things. And work, obviously, has like financial goals and things like that. Yeah, and personal relationships and prioritizing again going out, friendships, things of this nature. But then like maybe this can go under fun category, make French onion soup. Yeah, that kind of stuff.
I'll come over when you make that.
I would be happy to. Yes. Then we have the 10th anniversary of the podcast. Like I have.
Oh, wow.
Then we have to do something big, maybe a retreat, maybe a live podcast, maybe a couple of things. So I have ideas, but I haven't figured out what to do. I have a few ideas, as I shared with you last time. I'm going to do this project, letter writing project, expressive writing, a year of letters. I'll announce it on the podcast.
I love that idea, Anna.
I'm going to do my men's group, which I wanted to start in October, but I got busy with the thing. And another big project like that. I have a couple of workshops that I designed, but I wasn't able to do it. But I'm going to commit to doing those things. That's under the work. I put that under the work and also fun. You, what other goals do you have?
I have one of my big goals that I share with my husband is having people over our house again. Like, I feel like since the pandemic, like we just got out of that habit and we just miss it so much. And so we're hoping we have to do a few repairs of little house maintenance things that we'd like to do. And then we want to invite folks over more regularly. And I think just more fun and movement for me. I mean, I have a lot of specific goals in those categories, but just really prioritizing making time to move my body. I really I want to like dance. I want to like move my body, you know? And
Dance, move your body. Remember at my birthday party, we danced. Like that was one of my goals for my birthday for the women to just, I love dancing.
yeah,
We should go
yeah,
dancing together.
we should go dancing together.
Yeah.
That could be one of your podcast events. We can have a
Oh
race.
my gosh. Yes, that would be nice. We can bring people together and just have fun. Forget the podcast. Let's just dance and sing and eat. Yes, that would be
Yeah.
nice.
I want to do karaoke this year.
That was my goal last year, and we did it at my birthday. You left early at the end. We did
Oh,
karaoke. That was one of my goals.
oh,
Yeah.
I want to do that. I want to do that.
I have the equipment. We can do it.
All right.
We
So
should do
let's do a karaoke dance party.
Yes, definitely. Because that's also part of my ongoing list all the time. So we have to do that. I want to hear you sing.
All right. I'll do that for you. I'll pick a song just for you.
Oh, that's nice. And I won't rap for you. I'll sing
Okay.
a regular song. Oh boy.
What else? I actually do and probably influenced by your podcast, I do have under my family goal is creating new traditions, like new routines and new traditions. And I think my husband and my son are creatures of habit, and I love novelty. And so I do want to kind of shake things up a little bit.
Yes, yes, ma'am. I totally agree. I think people have this idea that, oh, you have to do this tradition because that's what gives you that memory, gives you that warmth. But sometimes, no, it's not about the tradition. It's about the feeling, like we said on the podcast. And you can just create the feeling that you want to feel with your family. And it can be a different tradition. But you're right, that's the most important thing. Well, so to wrap this episode up, I am delighted that you were able to join. We were able to have this conversation. Thanks for all the recommendations. I hope it was useful for the listener. I have those, I have questions for the listener. I'll put it in the show notes. They can download and do the powerful questions to ask themselves. And I can't wait for the new year. It's going to be exciting. The beginning of everything is always marked with excitement and anticipation and fear. And hopefully we'll set goals, we'll achieve goals, right? And we will be agents of our own life. I think one advice I have for people, to all my podcast listeners, because I do this, and yesterday at our support call, we talked about resting deeply and what that means. And it was clear to me that many people take breaks, but they don't fully rest. And I'm going to do a podcast probably on this, but my encouragement, my urge for people is to spend time outside and go into nature and spend time in nature. It's restorative, it's healthy, it's good for you. Take your kids, make part of that your everyday, or weekly hikes. Learn from me. It's partly the reason I'm very happy and positive all the time is because I spend so much time in nature. And nature could be just a little green space where you live, or it could be a nice hiking place that you drive. Research recently they discovered that standing in front of a big body of water for 2 minutes down regulates your nervous system, engages your parasympathetic nervous system. And everybody's stressed out with the news, with the overwhelm and things like that. So make an effort to go outside, walk, move your body, stare at the, body of water, be among trees, but don't be inside. I feel like many people lack this, and I want to emphasize and encourage all my listeners to make nature and the outside part of their life this year, big time.
That's good advice. I think we should leave it at that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. It's very important.
Well, happy holidays, happy new year. Cheers.
Yeah, happy holidays. Thank you so much for inviting me on. And I'm so glad that I took the time to do some brainstorming, and I feel like I have a head start on my new year. So thank you.
Yay.
Yay.
Cheers.
Cheers.